What's going on, everybody? Thank you for tuning in and or clicking on to the first episode of It Gets Better, a podcast by Spooky Pete, yours truly. Today, our first guest is the Level One King. Am I saying that right?
Yeah,
On
that's
Twitter.
that's correct.
All right, he's got a YouTube channel y'all can check out. Just search for his tag. And then he's also the co host of a podcast called the Vetted Games Podcast. So be sure to check that out. Now, today, we're just going to take a second to really kind of explain, since this is the first podcast, essentially what we're trying to accomplish here. It's just have a talk with regular people, because regular people have different problems than celebrity people, right? So we're just gonna have talks every now and then with people that are doing their best to move forward with life, whatever that looks like with them, in hopes that maybe their experience can enrich your life. So, without further ado, how you doing, King?
Oh, I'm doing fine. Thank you for asking. Thank you for having me on your first podcast. I appreciate that.
I honestly appreciate you being here, and especially I can really appreciate how approachable, at least to me, our topic is, which is you are about to graduate school with your bachelor's. Am I correct?
Yeah, about to get that 4-year degree.
Oh, swish. Okay, so I guess first of all, let's start off with the high level type stuff. So, what was your undergrad, which I believe is your associate's, and then what's your bachelor's?
My undergrad was information technology, and then I just pursued that to my bachelor's. I'm getting a degree in the same thing. So,
So that's also kind of crazy because my background is in IT as well, and that kind
oh
of
wow,
yes, sir. So that actually makes me wonder. We might actually get into a little bit of technology talk, but that's fine. So
okay.
why? Here's my observation. So I live in a hub city, right? And technology jobs are a dime a dozen. However, it looks like the market is shifting from more administrative and supportive technological personnel, so like systems administrators, help desk, blah blah blah, to
hmm
more of an implement and support type role. So maybe you might be an implementation specialist for Micros, or you might be a sales engineer for a cloud services provider, and your job is basically to just go in there, integrate a couple systems, and hit the bricks. So, what made you want to pursue a field of study that maybe might not have the kind of jobs that I think a lot of people are expecting once they get their degree?
Do you want the real answer, or do you want the one I keep telling people at school?
The real, the real answer.
Um, So actually, when I got out of high school, I wanted to be a biomedical engineer.
Oh,
By the time I had finished high school, I'd already finished 3 years of biology, and I was just like, this biology stuff is cool. I'd love to go ahead and work as a biomedical engineer. And I told my folks about that. And next thing I knew, I had an associate's degree in IT.
so was it just your folks were just kind of like, hey, no, you should do computers. That's popular.
It was more like you should get a job that I've heard of before.
Wow. Okay. That makes sense. So is that what you're gonna try and do for the rest of your life, or
Um, my hope is that I go ahead and get a job that's somewhere around the same degree path as what I'm currently doing right now. And then maybe, if I'm lucky, get into a company that's willing to go ahead and help me go back to school to get my master's or to pursue a degree in biomedical engineering so I can just do what I want anyway.
okay? So what would that? So first of all, I am totally not versed in the maths and the sciences, which
Mhm.
kind of seems counterproductive to being in IT. But
Trust me, you don't really need that much anyway. The computer does half of it for you.
hell yeah. Well, so then I guess the first thing is, what would that, at your age, what would that look like? Well, okay, no. Let me back up. How do you feel about the job situation? Because I know I'm a millennial, and I know that a lot of the people I talk to that, are kind of keeping tabs on what's going on are stressed out about the job market and finding a job. So like, how do you feel about that as another human being?
So the job market is difficult to navigate. I'm not gonna try to sugarcoat it. I'm not trying to, make it easy. The advice I was given all throughout school and working before college was when you're looking for a job, that's a full-time job.
Yep.
You're spending hours, 8 hours, 10 hours a day, filling in applications, and yeah, it is rough. However, you also have to understand the field that we exist in. I'm assuming because you're an IT major as
Yes, sir.
well. Uh, that is a field that is actually very ripe of opportunity right now. And the reason why is because the majority of professionals who have been working in the industry for the last 20, 30 years, they're all of retiring age. They need people to fill those roles. So what's going to happen is that the people who were at the lower level roles, interns, lower level management, are going to move up, and then those $60,000 a year jobs are going to open up. And there's going to be a large gap that companies are going to need to fill. And
And
that's why projected within the next 10 years, there's supposed to be a large amount of growth for the IT sector.
so my question to you then is, what are your thoughts? Because a lot of the mid-level folks in I'm fortunate to have a decent network, so let me just preface this by saying that. And a lot
Sure.
of the mid-level folks in my area, who I think are the kind of people you were talking about who are going to move up eventually as the older generation retires, their concern is that a lot of the incoming talent is used to like mobile devices, so iPads, cellular phones, stuff like that. I mean,
Hmm.
do you think that's going to help those of us that are maybe more technology centric, or do you think things are going to change such that the industry is going to accommodate a more mobile first workforce?
Well, it honestly depends on what you're actually doing. So, like, for example, if you're working in data warehouses where all you're going to be doing is monitoring these large supercomputers that are processing data and storing it over periods of time, it's not really like high on your resume or high on the checklist when they're looking through candidates to see how well you're good at mobile developing. However, if you're working with a company that needs help understanding how to modify their websites, like if you're working web design, for example, and how to better create a responsive web page for mobile devices, since the majority of today's youth and the majority of people are on their phones. That's a more marketable skill. It depends on the your specialization in the IT field. For me personally, it's information security.
Okay, so out of curiosity, have you heard of something called Project Honolulu by Microsoft?
I think it came up actually when we were talking about our podcast. Can you remind me about that?
So Project Honolulu is a basically a web interface for Windows Server infrastructure. The last time I checked in on it, it basically Microsoft's goals for it are a single pane of glass that can manage your entire cluster. So this is more geared towards people that are using data center editions of server, and I think maybe just depending on like how hardcore, like yeah, like how hardcore you're going with Hyper-V, because maybe you just bought like a shit ton of standard licenses, which I don't know why you would, and just want to manage your stuff that way. It's basically a GUI to manage server infrastructure. And I was just
That's
kind of,
interesting.
yeah, and that's, I mean, if you ever, outside this podcast, if you ever look into it and have thoughts, definitely want to hear about those, because I'm interested in this turn we're taking where everyone's just trying to condense complex services into this single pane of glass with a couple buttons. So,
Well, I guess what you're really pushing with this idea is there is a viable argument going on right now that a lot of traditional IT jobs are being lost out to automation, um, with the process of cloud computing and with the process of virtualization, machine hardware parts. You're looking at a bunch of people who are Cisco workers and everything like that losing their jobs within the next 5, 10 years because they can't keep up with uh, automation, and
well,
that is something that's happening.
Yeah, actually, so just to kind of share my experience, and then I swear to God, we will actually switch to what y'all want to hear about. Um,
Sorry,
so
we're nerding out.
I actually used to work for Cisco. I was a TAC engineer for a product called Prime Infrastructure.
Good for
So
you, man.
yeah, so you know, I'm not really sure what I can say, but I'm not really gonna give anything away.
Hey, don't get in trouble for this podcast, man. Don't do
Yeah,
it.
nah, I'm not. It's really it's interesting to be on the inside of a company that's trying to pivot, right? Because a lot of what you saw in my position. So, are you familiar with Prime Infrastructure?
Uh,
Probably not, because that's more an administration tool than like a security tool. I mean, it can be both in the fact that whatever. I'll just kind of like high level it. So basically, what it is it's this Java based application that gets deployed either as a physical appliance or a virtual machine in your infrastructure. The whole point of it is you use things like SNMP to catch traps and do things based off the configuration of your environment, with the hope that because you are monitoring all your switches and your access points and what have you, you can easily remediate things like firmware, configurations, what have you, and things just work.
oh, it's just
So,
like a console that like some guys using to manage everything that's going on.
right. And it will even do crazy stuff like beam shaping and all that jazz.
Okay.
Um, and so, what you actually realize, though, is that even in this technologically sophisticated, but I would say like lower level. I mean, you're a TAC engineer. It's not like you're the manager of a department or something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you had a lot of old guard who had to go through the, I want to say, the gritty years of IT where you were still pushing
Yeah,
around
those bad
computers.
years where it's like, oh
Yeah.
man, this machine only takes a square connector. We only have
Yeah.
a circle one, so we have to go ahead and solder this wire to be a
Yeah.
square connector.
I mean, these are the people that were still using parallel and serial ports. Yes,
Ooh.
sir. And what is it? PS2 is the old school peripheral. I don't know. Okay, but yes, basically what I was trying to say is it's really weird, right? Because it showed me how, in order to facilitate our vision of the future, which is simplified management interfaces, it just works type functionality, we're having to really rely on the old guard to come in and say like, okay, no, this is how this is supposed to work, and then send their feedback, not only to the customer but back to the developers who are developing the application as well. So
I mean, but to be fair, like, that's experience. It's built off of years of working with these systems. So, I mean, that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing.
do you think no. I agree with you. You're right. That is a good thing. My question to you is, though, do you think the next generation is going to get that get the benefit of that kind of work experience, or are we kind of precluding the next generation of a deeper understanding of technology because we're using the old generation's knowledge to simplify our processes, and you know what I mean?
No, no, I completely understand you. Yeah, no, I mean, I get where you're coming from. There's definitely going to be a knowledge gap that jumps once, like, let's just say, in a mystical fantasy situation, the old guard all leaves, retires on the exact same day. We're going to have a moment in which all the new blood is looking at these machines going, I don't understand how any of this works. Um, yeah, that's a difficult situation, but it's also something that a bunch of corporations, I can't speak for the places that you've worked, but a bunch of corporations, so, for example, I've worked in the government, they teach you and they encourage you and they actually give training about how to talk with representatives or with the old guard, as we're calling it, and try to connect with them to obtain that knowledge. They've kind of shifted their training in order to go ahead and have younger people come in and have a way to have discourse with them to really obtain that information.
Okay, that seems fair, and I guess that is kind of the point of internships and such.
Internships, even like the first few years that you're working there, that's the reason why they have mentor programs there at your job.
True. I haven't.
Yeah.
Okay, bet. because this isn't a technology podcast. So
This is not a technology podcast, but you know what? We can talk shop all you want after the podcast. I promise.
oh, I'm about that. All right. So then, okay. So guys, we're talking about school. I know a lot of y'all are in school for a whole bunch of different things. So let's start with your experience at the associate level, right? So I guess my first question is, you decided you wanted to go to school for some reason. Why?
Yeah. Sorry about that. My monitor decided to go quit on me.
Fine.
Yeah, no, I decided to go and pursue my associate's degree, and that came from graduating from high school and working out for in the just general sector for 2 years, and then going, you know what? I hate this. Let me go get my degree.
Okay. So when you started going to college, did you already have your future focus in mind, or was it just, hey, I don't want to be working retail for the rest of my life?
Well, okay, so when I first started college, I was working at, you know, like you said, a retail job, but it was actually during the transition period, midway through my associate's degree, that I had left that retail job, and I actually got a pretty decent job working as the assistant to the director of the Single Marine program over at the military base that I was at, and that was a nice place, and it had upward mobility. It's just the problem was is that I had issues with the hours and balancing out that with school. So honestly, like I could say that school was a priority to me, and it still is. But I could have easily gone the other way too and pursued a career path, probably running some kind of single marine program somewhere in
Yeah.
some other base or country or something. They have transfer things all the time.
So then that brings up a really good point, because I know for me in my situation, I'm coming off a year break from working, basically being out in society to, I had a situation that arose where I needed to like pull back and focus on my health. So now that I have that together and I'm going back out there into the job market, I'm starting to see that a lot of the positions, you always see that is available to work overtime if necessary, or the hours might be second or third shift. So I guess my question is, how did you manage school with the time commitments required from your employer?
Well, that's the beauty of being young, you know? You can burn all those hours and not die. I mean, technically you do die a little bit, but you can work and you can put out that the energy to go ahead and do both. And you can you we as people, we don't realize how much we're actually capable of doing until you're at the moment where you don't know that, like, if you can keep going. You know, there are plenty of
Yeah.
days that I was so tired from work, I was just like, I'll skip class. But I was like, no, I need to go. I need to maintain my GPA. And there were some times that I was just, doing homework until 3 o'clock in the morning. I was like, damn, I got work in like 5 hours.
Yeah. So it sounds like really you were just determined to get your education, so you relied on your own personal grit to just manage the situation and get it done.
Yeah, I'm pretty bad about that. There's a saying that I like to go ahead and hold myself to, and it's something I've been using, and it's what's been getting me through education. It's what's been getting me through work and everything that it's ever been difficult that I've ever faced. And that is, if you can ever think of something you've ever done in your life that was harder than what you're doing right now, and you survived that, then you should survive this.
So then what were some of those for you?
I we were talking about this earlier when you were asking me for bullet points on some education things. When I was in high school, I was a member of the International Baccalaureate program.
Yeah.
Are you aware of that?
No,
What that is?
could you explain that?
But basically, the International Baccalaureate program is kind of like AP, but
Okay.
it is this international program that exists across like 108 different schools across a bunch of different countries, and it's supposed to be this style of teaching that is synchronistic with all these other countries. It's supposed to give this unified education to make people from all around the world understand each other. That kind of stuff, right?
Yeah. So like kind of a I wouldn't necessarily say a cultural immersion program, but it's basically meant to help, you know, I guess foster communication and understanding between different cultures.
Yeah, and it also is supposed to foster very high level deductive reasoning. Um, the cultural aspect is a huge thing in there as well, with just understanding how certain things operate from another cultural bias. You know, we were educated on African culture, I think Chinese culture, Russian culture, things
So
like that.
so how does someone get into this program?
Uh, so the school has to apply for it itself, and then what happens is the once the school gets the ability to hold the IB program, which has to do with like teachers going through a rough training camp to go ahead and see if they're qualified to teach IB material, that kind of what jargon, whatnot stuff.
Yeah.
Once the school is vetted, it's you get the opportunity to do this. Then they open up the ability for students of high GPA, high club involvement, good standing to be able to take the IB program. And it is a very rigorous, it is a very strenuous experience. But yeah, no, it was just rough. I'm telling you right now, as a person who's about to finish his last semester of college, I have not struggled as hard as I did in high school.
And so what do you think it is going from that your I'm just going to say IB cuz I have a lazy tongue. Going from your IB in high school, the IB program in high school to college. What do you think it was just that, or do you think it was the fact that you seem like a very intelligent, involved person, and I think, the fact that you were in that program kind of speaks to that. Like, what do you think it is that made it so easy for you to make that transition and then operate well inside?
As much as I would hate to go ahead and toot IB's horn, because on a small stance, I do really do not like that program, at least the way it was taught over at my school.
Yeah.
It prepared me 100% for college. It over prepared me. It prepared me so much that my college wasn't able to keep up with the IB material that I was doing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Uh,
Okay.
I went to a community college directly out of high school, and then, well, no, not directly out of high school. I
The
worked
two
out
years.
for 2 years, and then I went to community college after getting my associate's degree. I then transferred to a 4-year university that's known for its IT department. And like I said, I still have not struggled as much as I did in the IT department, because these classes, they're nothing in comparison to what I was doing in the IB program.
Okay, so then let's do this. What do you think your struggles Okay, I mean that sounds jacked. What do you think your struggles would have been? And then what skills do you think you learned through being involved in activities in the IB program that helped you succeed? And supplemental to that, do you think there's anything you can tell our listeners about how to gain those skills outside of, academic programs that might prepare them for the workforce, but also cultures at large?
It's hard for me to go ahead and pick from like an outside academic program. I'd have to think about that.
Okay.
But I would say the most important skill that I was taught with IB was how to suffer. And I'm not saying this as a joke,
Yeah.
but like, you are beaten down so hard when it comes to the regulation, the what's expected of you. After every like 2 weeks, we were forced to go meet up with a representative from our school to go discuss why we had a low drop or a raise in our grades for that 2 week period, and we could potentially get kicked out of the program if we failed too much, or if we didn't do too well.
Wow.
Uh, it was There were many days in that program where I probably didn't sleep at all. Probably 2, 3 days of just no sleeping. I would skip class, skip school to finish assignments to go ahead and have them turned in on time. It was just impossible amounts of work. And the thing that I learned the most, uh, I eventually I reached a point where I wanted to go ahead and give up. I wanted to
Yeah.
quit the IB program. I wanted to be done with it. I wanted to just put it aside and never think about it ever again. But when I look over at my other classmates who are also struggling alongside me, and I'm seeing them like on the verge of just breaking down, these guys who are like they don't seem like they're able to function right anymore, and they're struggling as well to go ahead and do it. You find something inside of yourself, like you look deep down and you go, I gotta keep trying. I gotta keep doing this. And every day it's a single step. It's like I wake up at like, whatever time, and I go, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do this paper. I'm going to sit down in this chair. I'm not going to get out of this chair until this paper is done. I refuse. And then it's literally just meticulously planning out each step of your day.
Yeah.
And if something is important enough to you, like if the program, I don't know how to compare it else except for like maybe the military or really hardcore martial arts. You don't know what you're capable of until you've been at your worst.
So what did your system of organization look like? Because for me, I keep a color coded calendar in my Nextcloud that's basically, I basically use colors to determine the status and then, place things when they're due or when I need to have them done by. And that's ended up being really effective for me. So, like, what were some of the techniques that helped you stay organized during your, your collegiate career, let's say?
So one thing that I always encourage people to do is technology is great. It's so easy to go lose things in technology. It's so
Yeah.
easy to forget things. Always have a pen and paper version as well to remind you. What I normally did before going to college and making sure, like, because everything in college right now is typed, everything is electronic. You don't have to worry about that as much anymore. But I
Yeah.
developed the skill from my pen and paper routine, which was I got a binder from Walmart, $2 binder, uh, and then I bought these like 80-cent folders, color coded, right?
Yeah.
And I wrote down the name of each class. And I was like, the left side is for stuff that needs to be done in this class. Right side is for stuff that I finished. And I just flip through that every time and I go, all right, what do I need? Go to math. All right, I got these 3 worksheets in here. Crap, I forgot to do those. Let me go do them now. Go to history. Oh, my left side's done. I don't have anything here. Okay, go to psychology. Oh, the brain diagram.
Okay. So it sounds like systems of organization don't actually need to be expensive. Like, you don't need to go out and buy a PDA or something like that. You really, it could be as simple as a $2 binder and you can figure something out.
I
Seem legit?
believe personally that systems of organization are specifically personal. Personal. They a PDA may work for you. It might not work for me. It may work for a third person down the street. It's important to find out what makes you as a person focus on something. If you focus on colors, like if something real like colors really stick out to you, use colors in your organization. If you are a person who is really attached to dates, like you're like, I know that this day is when this thing happened, my birthday is on this day. I know everybody's birthdays. Maybe you might want to use like a traditional agenda with a calendar. If you really like, notebooking and scrapbooking or whatever, you might want to go ahead and just get like a simple spiral bound notebook and just write this is the checklist of things I need to do. It depends on the person. And it's important to go find out what your personal niche is to
Yeah.
go ahead and assist you with that. Because ultimately, what you're doing is this. This is the basic form of planning. It is your past self trying to remind your future self in the most you way possible to go ahead and do these things before before you forget, before the laziness kicks in. And the best way to do that is by using a method that you know you'll do. I joke around all the time. You really want past you to talk to present you or future you, and you need to grab future you's attention, because if future you finds that thing later on and goes, "Oh man, this was supposed to be due last week," you failed.
That, I can't really articulate it, but I want to say that that's actually really interesting advice because for me, so I started school and so I decided to take advantage of everything my school offers: education framework courses, career center, everything. And a lot of their approach is just saying, hey, these are existing systems of organization and they want you to pick a prescribed, predetermined system that everyone knows. And then it's really interesting to hear your take on it, which is, how can I effectively communicate to my present self what needs to be done? Which is a way that I've never heard of. I mean, honestly, I've never heard of anyone summarizing or talking about organization and planning in such a way. So that's probably definitely going to cause me to go through what I'm doing to talk to myself, because in hearing that, it sounds like there are some opportunities for me to maybe notate better. But yeah, so for the people watching, maybe take that away from this is that maybe you should start thinking about your things in terms of how can you communicate better to yourself versus how do I make sure I'm keeping this to-do list, on the refrigerator maintained.
Yeah, what do I like? I mean, if you like cats, get a cat journal, dude.
And are you familiar with the Art of Manliness podcast?
No, I'm not. But now that you've told me about it, I've got to go check it out.
Well, so they just had a guest on a while back who was talking about habits. And so basically I'm trying to see if you might have done this. So let me go here and then... Okay. So the episode number in particular is episode 470, A Proven System for Building and Breaking Bad Habits. And in it, the guest speaks on how he tries not to rely on sheer willpower to make changes, but actually creates ways to make his new habits more attractive. So that might look like changing his environment, like, going to a coffee shop to journal was an example, or, he wants to read at home, so he flips the sofa away from the TV, so the room now has a flow to not watch TV. Did you do anything like that while you were in school?
Oh, to break bad habits?
Yeah, like what worked for you?
So I don't recommend this to people because remember when I said about the way that the way I personally believe about these things is that everything needs to be very personal. You need to understand how your body works, how your mind works, and everything. The way that I respond to things is little tiny bits of pain, and that's not something to freak out about. What I did was I basically have a rubber band, and I put it on my arm.
Yeah.
And whenever I catch myself, let's just say using foul language, I don't use foul language, but let's just say, right?
Yeah.
Or saying a word I don't want to do, or interrupting somebody's conversation. What I'll do is I'll just take that rubber band, pull it up, and then I'll snap myself with it. And I go, ow, well, crap.
Now you know that pain is associated with that negative behavior.
Yeah, I don't want to do that 15 times.
So, as you were practicing that, did you notice anything? Like, what did you notice? What did you notice change? And how did you come about noticing that you and your life were changing as a result of your, effort?
The first thing you definitely notice is, man, this sucks.
Yeah, I know that's right.
And then you eventually, it doesn't come immediately, it comes maybe a little bit afterwards. But after the whole, ow, it sucks, you go, geez, 15 times, like in the last hour? And then you think about that, you're like, why is it 15 times? And then it makes you think of other things, which, this is, in my opinion, this is some advice I wish I could have given myself when I was younger. If you're hanging around people that make you go ahead and say, horrible profanity all the time, and you don't want to be that way, think about when you're snapping yourself the most. Is it around them? that might be a problem.
So, okay, go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, so I mean, so basically, it kind of sounds like you should have some self awareness to, know where you are or what your particulars are when you're making your bad decisions, but then also trying to fix them, right?
Yeah, eventually, honestly, the rubber band method will get you to notice it. It's up to you to fix it from then on. The most important thing, I believe, when you're trying to break these bad habits is taking notice of when you do it and how much you do it. When you're consciously aware of how much you're doing something
Yeah.
that you don't want to do, it's easier to go ahead and make that transition. There's still work involved in it. You have to, because now what you're doing is you can even remove the rubber band, and before you're about to say that word or do that thing you don't like to do, you'll, at least in my case, I look down at my arm and I go, oh, that's right, I'm better than this. I should try not to. And that's the hard part. It's the hard part of like, you're anxious. You start developing other weird habits like looking at your arm randomly in public. But it's these things that help you kind of stop. And over time, when you do that long enough, our brains are designed to work off of habits. Eventually, those habits will stop if you are just aware of them and you stop doing them after a long enough time. One of the things that I keep trying to tell a lot of my friends in real life right now is, yeah, the jokes are funny. I get it. Haha. Oh, there's a self-deprecating culture that's going on right now.
Yes.
People just saying things like, making jokes like, I want to die, or, I hate myself. Haha. Isn't that funny? And yeah, I get it. It's a meme. It's a joke. I'm not going to stop people from making funnies. But the thing is you have to understand there's a correlation to that, plus why you feel like everything is going wrong with your life. If you had to stop for a moment and go, I'm depressed all the time, I'm upset all the time, how many times a day do you go ahead and make a joke about hating yourself or wanting to not be you or other things?
Yeah. So that's actually, so you brought up a couple really good things. So the first thing I want to hit on is, what can you tell our listeners that don't have a sense of what self-discipline is like? Because for me, the way change happened for me is, like you said, I developed that sense of awareness through changing habits. So let's just use like smoking cigarettes, for example, right?
Okay.
I used to vape a lot, and I used to vape a lot in like a Starbucks, not in there, but just like 200 feet away from the door. I'm not an asshole. And then like out in public. And so, okay, this is basically what I did. So I noticed I vaped a lot, basically socially and out in public. So I kind of did some research, and it's like, hey, nicotine actually really only stays in your system for about 3 days, 4 days, depending on how much you smoke. And then after that, that's just you being moody and readjusting to not having it. So, my strategy was, okay, I'm going to change my environment. For 3 days, I'm just going to stay home, and that's my constraint. I'm not allowed to go outside. My vape, I threw it out, so I don't have it. I can't go anywhere. And I'm going to figure out new ways to keep myself preoccupied, which is how I actually ended up realizing I like to read. So
Okay.
For me, I guess what I'm trying to communicate is that what I learned is, for me, changing my environment helped me exercise better self-discipline, which I think is a skill in itself. So I developed the awareness and the ability to practice it. So in your experience, what was the thing that helped you develop this self-discipline and, ability to exercise it such that when you identified a problem, you could change it?
Martial arts.
Oh, guy, I do jujitsu. This is
Sweet.
nuts.
I've done taekwondo. I've done karate. I have done a little bit of Muay Thai, a little bit of BJJ, just all this other stuff. But
So,
no, I feel you. When I was a kid, I ran like 4 or 5, I was put into my first martial arts class. And the very first thing they go ahead and start doing to you, if it's a good place, is they
Yeah.
should teach you discipline, especially even at a younger age. They teach you when to bow, when to shut your mouth, when to go ahead and, when to kick the pad, things like that.
Yeah.
It's tiny things. Then I did the Young Marines for a bit, which again is another place to go ahead and learn discipline when you have a bunch of Lance Corporals shouting at you all the time. Growing up in a military family helps too.
So, okay, well, so I guess refine that question. I guess what I'm hoping you can communicate is what was it internally? Like you had all these external factors.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So like what did you do and what was that like in your head? Does that make sense?
Um, See, that's an interesting question because I've had the I've had the issue of being self-aware, I guess you could call it,
Yeah.
for as long as I can remember. And that's because it was drilled into me at an early age to understand the repercussions of every action that I've ever done.
Okay.
So there has been that kind of self-observance thing that has kind of pre-existed since I was a kid. But I guess to better put it, to kind of go with your answer, uh, is that there are, even if you have, let's just say, good habits, even if you do everything you feel like you should be doing,
Yeah.
you're going to have tiny habits you don't like. And to break those, to make the mental connection to go ahead and not stop the things that you don't like, the very, very tiny things you don't like about yourself, the aha moment that I like to call it is when you're able to go ahead and see when you're about to do something, realize you're about to do it, and say, I don't need to. When you're able to be that cognitive about an action that you're about to do, that is the moment where you're finally in control of yourself. So
Yeah.
I don't vape and I don't smoke, but if I were to say I smoked, I don't have that experience, so I can't say how I would react with like nicotine or anything like that. But if I am at the moment where I'm about to raise it to my lips and I can go, I don't need this, and I put it away, that's me taking control of myself again.
So it sounds like, for the listeners, it sounds like you should focus on developing a sense of self awareness. What are my habits? Are these habits good for me? And then really developing the focus and self discipline in the moment to redirect yourself from these bad habits in a way, like you were saying earlier, in a way that works for you. These are personal things, so there might not necessarily be a one size fits all approach to discipline, or self-control, which it sounds like for you what worked was not only being raised in a military family where you were made aware of the consequences to your action, but also by seeking out activities like Young Marines or martial arts that helped you develop a sense of self and a sense of discipline. Seem
Yeah,
legit?
no, there's a lot to that. The biggest thing I would like to add to that is there's a wonderful side effect that comes with uh, acquiring this self realization of the actions that you do,
Yeah.
and that wonderful side effect is self respect. When you're able to take control of yourself and say, no, I don't want to do this, or no, I don't need to do this, or you have that control over yourself, you understand what you as a person are actually capable of. You've actually mastered yourself to a point where your subconscious actions are not stronger than your mental capacity. That's how willpower is born. That's how willpower is crafted and tempered. When you're able to go ahead and have enough confidence in yourself as a person and as a being, that is where the wells behind your passion, your will exist, and that's where you draw from.
So, okay. So you were obviously you had these skills. You went through associates. What was the leap like from going from your associate's degree to transferring to a traditional university to get your bachelor's? Like, what kind of challenges what kind of challenges, struggles did you face? Like what changed and how did you overcome that kind of stuff?
So honestly, the way I would suggest for people, especially for people who have very similar paths to mine, which is they go to community college and then they transfer over to a 4-year college.
Yeah.
The biggest thing you need to realize is that when you make that change, and I can speak from a little bit of authority here on this because alongside myself, I've spoken with a bunch of other transfers and they all express the same sentiment. Community college is just like high school plus. You'll find friends, you'll find your niche, you'll find your group of people that you care about.
Yeah.
Because community college is just, it's a great experience. I suggest it to anybody who's coming out of high school. Don't be afraid. Go ahead and enjoy that. The challenge I immediately faced coming out of community college is the loneliness. When you go step onto that large university for the first time, and it could be for the high schooler who steps onto the university campus at the same time. I don't know. That wasn't my experience. I can only speak as a transfer student.
Yeah.
But when you're in that school that has thousands and upon thousands of students, and you realize I'm just like this tiny speck, insignificant person at this school of like probably 10, 13, 20,000, 100,000 students. Let's just go ahead and make numbers up. You realize like, wow, I'm very lonely when it comes to this. And you the first thing you do then is you go out, you try to go ahead and find friends. You try to find people who are of like mind. And because of the nature of something like that, most of the time you won't. I mean, I'm in my last semester of school and I just started finding friends at my university.
Wow.
And a lot of that means that you're going to go ahead and spend a lot of nights just, not having people to talk to. And of course, there are problems at the university level, and there are problems once you get past your associates and you start doing these things. But they become kind of smaller, at least in my experience. Like studying for a test becomes smaller because you've been studying for tests for 12 plus years, right?
Yeah.
You know at this point how to do this.
Yeah.
Or a teacher pisses you off and you're like, well, I've dealt with like 6 of these at this point. So they still exist, but you don't understand how difficult that actually becomes when you have no one to talk to, when you have nobody there to bitch with, and then it just festers and it's stuck inside of you and it builds up over time. And that's the problem.
So can you suggest anything to our listeners to help them? Because I know social isolation, there's this, I forget where it comes from, but I remember there being this statistic about how like 60% or something of millennials, despite being connected through social media, feel more alone than ever. So like, what could you recommend to our listeners to help get that sense of self-respect and make those friends that, obviously are beneficial? Like, how did you cope with not having those people, and what did you do to meet these friends?
So it's interesting because the biggest thing that helps, at least from my experience, is the things that you were actually taught when you were a child, when you went to kindergarten or when you were in elementary school. And that is, find the thing you like. Just do it. Find the thing that you enjoy and then go to it. And it's funny when I look at it from an objective point of view, because the school, they have these functions that are there designed to help you network and help you be there with other people. But I mean, you've been to them yourself, like the career functions, things like that. They have clubs at universities. But I mean, can you like also share the sentiment? I don't know if you do, but that it feels kind of forced or unnatural until you actually go there. Like when you're looking at it, it's just like, wow, it's literally a room in which the school is trying to corral a bunch of people together and hope for the best that we all get along.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, for better or for worse, I don't appreciate politics like it seems people do. I'm not the kind of guy that likes to gossip or talk shit, so I usually just avoid work functions. I've been to them in the past, and I will never forget, at my last job, we were supposed to go to one of our coworkers' stand-ups. He was performing stand-up for the first time in public, and so...
Is he funny?
Oh my god, he was so good. It was so bad. Oh, yes. Okay, short answer, yes.
Can I stop you right there?
Yeah.
That's the reaction that I'm talking about that fixes your problem. You asked me before, how do you fix this solution? You initially started off saying, I don't like going to work functions because that's normally not for me. And then immediately, the moment that you begin to talk about this coworker that does stand up, you go, "Oh my God, he's so funny. Oh, he's awesome."
Well, yeah, like
That's how you deal with it.
he's awesome, but the thing
Exactly.
is you know how they have, you know how your office is just like, hey, yeah, so we're going to such and such place. We're going to Bob. We're going to Bob's stand up thing tonight. So we're going to have drinks here and then he'll be performing at this time. And there's like all this like unwritten stuff, like at least the way that company ran things, it's like if they say the event starts around blah blah blah, like it's 6, but we're really just there for Bob. I mean, the CEO was there, the founder of the company was there, and what was really weird is I remembered that they were looking at who was there. Like they were trying to see like who the good employees were versus the bad. And then the conversation over hors d'oeuvres and drinks was literally just people bitching about work and not, hey, we're outside of work. How are your kids? Hey, are we going to go biking this week? Oh, snap. I just lost my monitor. Give me a second. There it goes.
No problem.
Okay. So, at least for me, the question I asked myself is, what kind of person do I want to be? What kind of social cues and social skills do I want to invest myself in picking up? And for me, what I kind of realized is that getting together to get buzzed and talk shit about people and things at work is not really what I enjoy doing. And so to be fair, I kept going to some, right? I'm like, okay, maybe different people will come, blah, blah, blah. And I think what I kind of realized is that, yes, cultures vary by businesses, because like a lot of things that, like one big thing every tech company or, startup wants to say is, oh, we have a great culture. We let you ride your scooters around the office and you can let your cat sit on your keyboard. And
Oh yeah, great. Yeah.
yeah, and it's just kind of like, okay, bet, but
Coming to work with shoes and sandals, socks and sandals, right?
yeah, and it's just kind of like, okay, it's great that you say that, but culture is still something that's made. You don't just like let people come in and do whatever and expect there to be this like crazy collaborative awesome culture. And so, my background is in a lot of startups. Like my last 4 jobs have been with startups around my area. Some you probably know of, and I can tell you about them off the podcast if you're interested. But
I'd love to network with you. I mean, we're people in the same field.
yeah. So what I realized is there seems to be this overarching culture in quote unquote corporate jobs where, every company wants to present a certain way, but facilitating the culture you're trying to inspire is actually much harder. And I think after I went through about my third, I'm just going to say employer, when I went through my third employer, I kind of realized that really that's more easier said than done. So what I focused on at least was, like you said, going out there and figuring out the things that I enjoy doing and putting myself around them. So what that looked like for those of y'all listening is I actually figured out who the people are at my work that enjoy working out, biking on the weekends, maybe going out for a beer or something like that. And I spent my emotional effort bonding with those people because we had something in common that was actually positive and that we could do together. And so I noticed a lot of my emotional reward or satisfaction or what have you actually came from focusing on people and not the like corporate culture as a whole. Does that make sense? Anything you
No, that
want
makes
to?
perfect sense.
Yeah. And speaking to your point, so for those of y'all that are maybe looking for something actionable, but like me, don't probably feel comfortable using your work as a place to find social connections, there are things like the Meetup app, which is free to use. There's
Yep.
tons of interests that you can search through and do that. And then, I mean, I'm not all about Facebook, but I mean, theoretically, you could just set like events up or something on your Facebook page just to kind of gauge the interest, couldn't you?
Well, there's also, there's also more traditional methods that you can utilize as well. I mean, if you live nearby, if you live nearby like a city or like a county or something, try to see if they have a community center. Like,
That's a good
do
idea.
something, do something insane, do something you've never done before, especially if you have free time. Take flamenco dancing. Maybe you
Mm,
might find somebody. Like, do something crazy. Even if you hate arts and crafts, just go ahead and do something. Try to meet new people.
that makes sense. And yeah, that's actually a really good idea because for those of y'all that aren't familiar with it, I mean, community centers typically offer everything from like cooking. I know when I was like 8 or 9, my grandparents signed me up for karate, and I did like 2 years of karate at the community center. It's honestly a great way to like get to know the people specifically in your community and to practice or pick up new skills without spending like, Gracie Combatives is like $250 to
Yeah,
$300 for that course, or you can go to the community center, have an in-face or an in-person community to practice with, get that social experience, get the skill experience. That's a really good idea. So
of course.
yeah, check that out. All right.
Also, I mean, if you also want, if none of that really speaks to you, and if you feel like just dirty, let's
Yeah.
just say, because like when you were talking about earlier about, man, I really don't feel comfortable about this, and you just want to balance out some good with some of the bad that you just keep dealing with.
Yeah.
Some of the things that I used to do, I did community service. I reached out. I just was like, I'm so bored, and I'm so tired of all this crap. I see like all this people that are angry all the time and everything like that. I need to do something good. Help out at a food shelter. Go to a cold weather shelter and talk with some of the people there. Sometimes that's all they want. They just want somebody to chat with.
So, okay, first of all, double heck yes, because I will say this. So, at my lowest points, so like let's just say first quarter of 2018, I was at a pretty low point, and it was I had no idea what to do with myself. I knew I was craving like social interactions to kind of like not feel so isolated. And it was insane how wholly satisfying the act of volunteering was. It was an easy pretense for me to go out, be in public around people that might not have the same expectations of me as, say, someone at a work function might have. So it's easy to get along with people there. You're doing something good, not for yourself, but for the community. So it's like a twofer because you live there and you're improving the situation, but then you're also making it better for other people. So there was this like deep sense of satisfaction all around. So definitely, guys, please consider that because God knows we need as many volunteers as we can get. There are no shortage of problems in the world.
Yeah.
Just saying. Okay, and then another thing you were saying earlier is I want to say you were talking about responsibility, and you gave this like Jordan Peterson type vibe where, um, you know, oh God, what were you saying?
Some people would say that's a compliment. Other people would say that it's an insult. But I appreciate
Yeah, I
it.
mean, I mean it as a compliment. Um, can you talk about what taking on responsibility did for you and your sense of self? Because it sounds like you had the discipline from the get-go, but I feel like there's something in your story about how you taking on responsibility led to you being a more competent and um, less self-conscious in the negative traditional sense.
Okay. Um. So if you wanna go ahead and know about your habits, let's just say,
Yeah.
try being in charge of a group of people. They'll either you'll find out one of two ways. They'll either talk about you behind your back and you'll catch them, or they'll jokingly bring them up in conversation, and you'll go, "Oh, I don't really do that, do I?" But yeah, no. So I've had plenty of opportunities to be in charge of groups, and the thing I am going to say first of all is it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
Being in charge of a group of people is not for everybody. Sometimes people are put that way because of a work position. Some people really like the thrill of being in charge of other people. You find out really fast what kind of leader you are when things start falling apart. And I still struggle with that. I still struggle with trying to make myself a better person,
Yeah.
because one of the few things that I agree about with leadership is, or no, not one of the few. I agree with a lot about certain aspects of leadership, but one of the bigger things that I view is that a leader should lead by example.
Yeah.
And if you want your, I don't want to call them subordinates, but if you want your team members to work the same way that you do, or if you want them to go do something, you got to demonstrate to them that you can do that. You got to demonstrate to them that you are willing to go ahead and be there with them when things happen. So the only times I'll pick a few times real fast, and that is when I was like in ROTC, I was leader of my class, and basically, I was always running them out for drill, running them out for PT, things
Yeah.
like that. The thing I always did was, for example, when we're doing a formation run and little Billy drops off on the back, I go ahead and make it clear. I shout it out to everybody. We're not leaving behind Billy over there. We're gonna go behind, and we're gonna go at Billy's pace, and we're gonna go run at Billy's pace until we get back. What that does is it instills to the group that we don't leave people behind, and that we are only as strong as our weakest link,
Yeah.
and that you need to go ahead and ensure that everybody makes it through, and you need to build up the weakest person to go ahead and come up with a group. And that's when you go ahead and you work with Billy. You get Timmy, who's your best runner, to go ahead and partner up with Billy. Maybe they go running on weekends now. Maybe they start hanging out. Maybe they start becoming friends. You never know.
Yeah.
You never know what Billy's situation is. But the important thing is that you need to be an effective leader. You need to effectively be able to go ahead and do everything that I've discussed earlier in this podcast. You can't really hope to lead people if you yourself are uncontrollable. You can't hope to be in charge of a group of people if you can't notice the faults in yourself
Yeah.
and be able to go ahead and handle those. And once you're able to go ahead and kind of control that and be in control of yourself, then you notice that these people are suffering the same problems that you are. You got to go ahead and help them. That's what you're there for. And ultimately, the biggest role of a leader is that you're taking these people, you're helping them, you're grooming them to go ahead and be better, and then they leave. That's the important part. That's the thing that every leader needs to remember here.
So it sounds like. No, go ahead.
Yeah, all I just wanted to say is that you are just there. You're there as an avenue to help that individual grow to reach their full potential.
So to I think summarize, it sounds like what you're saying. So Jordan Peterson has this. One of his ideas is you see a problem, you go fix it, and you don't call attention to it. You just do what you need to do in service of making the world better than you left it. And it sounds like for you took responsibility to improve your community, which in this case is the young Marines, I think is like the right way to say that, or being a leader of your group. You took on the responsibility of being the leader of your group, identifying even your weakest links, and then took on the responsibility of elevating them. And through that, not only did you make your community better through, having more fit individuals or more competent individuals, but then you yourself not only gained the competency of a manager or a leader, but also the, I would want to say the self-image. Like you were able to develop a good self-image of yourself by taking on responsibility and seeing the positive results come of that. Does that seem right?
No, that is definitely right. The only thing that I kind of want to nitpick on
Yeah.
from that is that a lot of it you were talking about my personal accomplishment, and I don't know if that was the intention or not. The important thing I want to drive home is that effective leadership stems from this idea of removing I from the equation. It's about us. It's about we. It's about this team. It's no longer about you. You're here. You're already put in a position of authority. You've
Right.
gotten your time in the spotlight, whatever. That doesn't matter. What matters now is the team. It's the most important thing. It's even more important than your personal obligations. That means you as a person, as a leader, are dedicated completely to this group of individuals that you were put in charge of. Their lives are important to you. Everything that they do, if the struggles that they're facing, your responsibility. The When they can't go ahead and do something, then you should be the first person, with them to go ahead and help improve that skill. As a community, as you say it, as a community grows, that dictates the growth of a leader, I would say.
Yeah.
When you're able to effectively look back and see the impact that the community themselves have done and how autonomous the group is, because ultimately, in my opinion, a great leader should be so in connected with their group and building up the group so well that a leader should be able to step away and they should be able to function completely well on their own. Like, it should be fine. They should be able to go ahead and handle all this on their own. And then eventually they branch off and then they start their own thing. And if they choose to go ahead and take those things that they learned and then incorporate that and, help build up other individuals, that's a good thing.
Yeah. So I guess now let's kind of shift to, present day. You're about to graduate with your bachelor's.
Okay. Yep.
And I guess, to kind of bridge between, millennials who are going out there and confronting the world for the first time, or maybe even really, younger people. What have you taken away from, well, I mean, obviously it's discipline. I guess,
Discipline.
what does the future hold for you? Like,
What does the future hold for me?
yeah, like
So,
what, okay,
because
let me,
of that discipline. Oh, sorry.
no, I'm sorry. Let me just try and rephrase that better. So what's your definition of success? And now that you have the tools of discipline, a good self-image, a college education, what are you going to do to reach your idea of success? Like, what's next?
So, I agree with this idea 100%. And this idea is that success ultimately comes down to how confident are you as a person in yourself.
Yeah.
And the reason why that's the most important thing is that no matter if you have confidence in yourself, and try not to mistaken this for overconfidence, because it's a very thin line between the two.
Yeah.
But if you have confidence in yourself and you've known that you've done harder things in your life and you've come up on top and you know what you're capable of and what you're not capable of, there is not a single thing that you can't do. And I know that sounds like crazy out there optimistic, sounds like a motivational poster.
Yeah.
But what I'm finding with a bunch of my peers is that a lot of the times, they get, like, for example, they'll get like an interview and then they'll get a job and then they feel really bad because they're like, man, I probably could have negotiated a better salary, but I didn't want to.
Yeah.
And that's when I ask them, do you as a person feel like you rate a better salary? Well, I have these certifications and, I've done, internship work with this company and that company, and I'm really knowledgeable on the subject. And I go talk to your boss. No, there's no way I can do that. Stop. What you need to foster there is you need to foster your self-worth, because selling yourself short is not going to help you out in this world where everybody's competing against you.
Okay. So
It is in my opinion, it is a tougher time now than it has ever been. And I've talked to a bunch of people from the previous generations, and they say the exact same thing. It is a tough world out there. We need people who are competent in themselves and competent in their skills.
So one thing I want to do, because you brought up a really good point. So probably, based off my analytics, this podcast is going to end up being, targeted by the powers that be to younger people.
Sure.
And
My age, probably.
yeah, well, dang, how old are you?
I'm 23.
23? Bet. I mean, you sound older, so hell yeah for maturity. So then, I want to stop and unpack an idea. So you were talking about getting a raise, right? And how
Yeah.
people were shortcoming them or like shortchanging themselves. So my 2 cents on this is if you're going to go out and you're going to ask for a raise, you need to have reasonable criteria to justify that raise. So that could
Yes.
either be, hey, I have loyalty to you, so I want to stay here. However, a better opportunity was presented to me here. I plan on pursuing that if, we can't come to an agreement because, at the end of the day, we all need to look out for ourselves. So
Of course. Yeah.
so that's one part of it. But then also the other part of it is, okay, at the end of the day, I think the only leverage you really have is like if you're going to go in and you're going to ask for a raise, it kind of sounds like you need to be prepared to leave anyway cuz like that's just how people are, unfortunately. But how do you build a case for a raise? And to put that in another term, how do you reasonably gauge your self-worth and your contributions to your environment? You know, I feel like a lot of people like want a raise because things are hard and they want to get a raise like just to get by. But what I don't think a lot of people are hearing, as much as it sucks to hear, is that if you want a raise, even though like shit is hard out there in the world, you still need to be doing something to justify getting that raise.
Yes.
So maybe that means you know some of the things I've done in the past, like I've troubleshot, warehouse operations to see how a business was using IT in their warehouse and what could be done. And I realized by, doing a couple things like changing our like wireless policy on our computers, because basically the workstations get authorized to use the wireless and then the user gets authorized to actually get into the network. So like we had some problems there, and then we also had like simple things like not having scanners at each workstation, blah blah blah, or maybe all these things should be wired now instead of wireless, since that environment has a lot of, crosstalk between bands. And we realized we were able to pump out about like 70 more units a day, which led to a $250,000 increase in revenue for the business. So that was a tangible, articulatable achievement that I could put solely on me and say, look, I'm working hard. I've helped you increase revenue by making your business more efficient. I think I deserve a raise, blah, blah, blah. What would you say to someone to help them figure out what?
When it's a good time.
Yes.
So you brought up an interesting point, and it's that just because you have confidence in yourself doesn't mean that your actions merit reward. For example, let's go ahead and just put reward there
Yeah.
because that's a lot easier to work with.
Yeah.
So I want to point out something that I actually just said asked. I didn't say expected. And the reason why is because a lot of your management is normally going to be really good at telling you, okay, why do you think that?
Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
let me review your history for the last year. Okay. Well, it says here that you actually have been skipping out on work like 15 times a day this month, Sally. Well, why is that? But the reason, the importance of why I said it's important to go ahead and ask, and it's important to go ahead and talk with your upper management about things. The first of all, the most important place to begin is when you're in the interview chair
Yeah.
or when you're negotiating your contract or your salary. If you can't be real with your employer there, and you can't, put a hard number based off of previous work that you've done or the skill set that you're bringing to the table, you're never going to go ahead and be able to really stand up to them later on. That's something you need to develop. I mean, yeah, so you missed your opportunity when you were negotiating your salary.
Yeah.
It's going to be difficult for you to go ahead and go in front of them again and talk about something like money.
Yeah.
And I understand that. I understand that a lot of people, they don't have that. They don't have the the courage, let's say, to go
So
ahead and do something like that.
cutting in real quick. So would that mean that when you are going through the not the onboarding, but the interview slash negotiation phase, it's probably a good idea to know what you want ahead of time that will make you happy in that position and to ask for it up front because it's so hard to ask later?
Well, so I'm a personal believer that when you finally get to that interview stage, you better know everything about that company. You better know everything about that position. You better know the company's slogan.
Yeah.
I said two things combined together. Sorry,
You're fine.
but when you're sitting down in that chair, you go, well, when I applied for this position, the pay rate was like 65,000. Let's just say
Yeah.
entry level position, required a bachelor's degree, has all these certifications put as the requirements, and yeah, you listed at 65,000. Well, I wanted to inform you, if you look over my over at my previous work, my portfolio over there, I actually have done a lot of the things that you're asking, and I've had quite a bit of success with the last two companies I am and the projects I've been working on in my school. In
Yeah.
fact, I was able to do this. Use those as talking points. Be open about these things. And the reason why you have the confidence to be able to negotiate something like that is because that's what the employer wants to hear. Surprising, I know, it's crazy. So the employer wants to hear you talking about money, and the reason why they want to hear you talking about money is because when you do that, when you sit down on the chair and you're looking them face to face, and you know, first of all, the pay rate, the job, the requirements, what the company does, what their motto is, what the shares, if you know all this information, that tells the employer this guy's done a lot of research.
And he's serious.
He's very serious. In fact, he's so serious and he's so confident in himself that he thinks that deserves like an extra $8,000. Okay, well then, Mr. Jimmy, sell me on why I should pay you 8,000 more when I barely know you. That's your chance.
Yeah.
That's your chance right there. You open up the doorway to a better salary, to a better working experience when you understand what you're capable of, going back to what I was talking about earlier. But it's important to understand and build that confidence in yourself, that self-realization through yourself, through merits. And that's what you were talking about. You can go up to your boss every other week. I don't suggest it. I really do not.
Yeah.
You can go up to your boss every other week saying, you know what, boss? I came into work every day this week. I think I deserve a raise. Well, no, you're making the common denominator there. No, he's not going to give you a raise because of that. But you'd be surprised how many people are out there these days. How many people are in our age bracket that are working their butts off, are a pinnacle member of their community, pinnacle member of their workforce. The management has no complaints with them and wants to reward them, but they're just so busy they can't really look at them. And they think they're completely content with how they are, but they don't speak up. They don't talk about these things. And though this is more guided to those people.
So it sounds like, so one thing I would say, like, that's come to my mind is that if you guys are in a situation where you're trying to do this, I would say take notice of the direction the conversation is going in as an indicator of your company culture. Because I'll say that, I mean, I've had to go in for that conversation. Like, there was a point where like throughout the course of my year, I had a bunch of achievements associated directly with me that had a demonstrable effect on not only business efficiency, but the amount of revenue the company was allowed to realize because of the changes. And so, I go in there and I'm like, hey, I've had a really strong year. I'd like to discuss a raise in my compensation. And I was mind blown, right? Because I'm the kind of employee that's usually there like 30 minutes to an hour early, depending on like what my manager lets me get away with, because I enjoy doing what I like to do. So putting in the hours was never the problem, but I was mind blown that the first thing that happened is the HR representative, instead of engaging me in a conversation about it, they used that opportunity to try to find anything wrong with my performance and actually discipline me. And I didn't, yeah. And it's, so I guess one thing I want to share with the audience while we're talking about this is actually use these opportunities to see how your company responds, because, you know, especially if you're a good employee and the reception you get from literally the human representative of your company is, nah, fuck that noise, you know, you've been doing this and this wrong, which, I mean, thank God in my case, I'm not a shitty person, so I didn't have
So let me guess, they had to find like the simplest things, like, oh, you took too long of a bathroom break.
No, I shit you not. So like the week before, so I had been sick like 2 weeks before. And so I ended up working like 3 days, and then I took the weekend off because I was like, it was to the point where I was getting a fever. Or sorry, not the weekend, like the Thursday and Friday off. So that the week after that, some like C-suite level guy was basically complaining because I wasn't available to like help with his technological crap, and that made its way around the office. Oh my gosh, Spooky Pete's not there when we need him, blah 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 blah. So like the first thing the HR person did was go back to that incident, like, well, you know, you seem to have a pattern of not being responsive to the business and blah blah blah. And I'm like, okay, bet, but why don't you go back like a week further into my file and check out that doctor's note that I turned in before putting in the request with my manager? Oh man, oh my gosh, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't see that. I'm like, bitch, please.
But I wanna key in on what you just did there.
Yeah.
So, because that is a very real problem that you're going to face when you go ahead and do something like this, for somebody who's never experienced this before. When you go up and say, hey, I feel like I've done a little bit more work than, you know, I've worked here for a while, I've, you know, saved you guys a lot of money, you know, can I get some kind of raise or something like that, or some kind of recognition for this or something? I don't know. But when you do that, there's a propensity that they might do something like that, or they might just tell you no.
Yeah.
But you yourself demonstrated that you were confident in yourself enough to go be like, no, I have a doctor's note right here, I can defend my claim.
Right.
See, when push comes to shove, it's your ability to understand if you deserve it or not. Like, yeah. And you're willing to stand up for what you believe in that case, especially if you're right, especially if they're just shortchanging you.
Yeah.
You know, you defend that right all you can, because if you don't, then they're just, what that's going to tell the company is that they can go ahead and use and abuse you. Don't do what I did when I was first starting off over in the workforce and let them work me all day, every day.
Yeah. So, okay. So basically, so trying to distill the insights, I think we're, you know, hopefully giving listeners, be able to defend yourself. So that means, you know, if they're going to say you're not responsive or you're not out sick, you need to be sure that that's not because you're just choosing not to show up for work, or you're a sloppy,
legitimate reason.
Yeah. And then also, you need to know your worth. So if you want to raise, or you want to take that next step in life, whatever it might be, you need to know why you're doing it. So if you want to raise, there needs to be a why. You know, my attendance is great, my productivity is above, you know, the numbers, average, whatever. My employment has brought X, Y, and Z benefit to the company. So it seems logical that because of these things, I get, you know, X% of a raise. And if you don't feel like your company is going to honor that, like honor your commitment to the organization, be ready with leverage. Have you gone out and looked at what the job market looks like? Is it easy? Is your job market looking for
Are,
employees. Do you have
are
a
people
counter?
kicking down the door to get you to work for them?
Right. Well, I mean, I don't think that ever really happens outside of. Well, I mean, yeah, if you
You'd be
network.
surprised.
If you
You'd be
network.
surprised.
Okay, so fair enough. Are people actually seeking you out? Make sure you come in.
Depends on the quality of your work, of course.
Yeah, it really just kind of seems like you need to have reason, but you also need to have leverage. And
Yeah.
that means it would be nice if we could have this conversation as civil human beings that, I'm working hard for you. Obviously, hard work should lead to a reward, but I understand that might not be your philosophy because you're trying to keep the bottom line low. So
Yes.
that's when it comes to, okay, fine. If you don't feel like paying me what I'm worth is something you're capable of doing for one reason or another, no judgment, it's just business. Then I'm going to go ahead and accept this offer, and please take this as my 2 weeks. An email will follow, listo sabe.
Well, I kind of want to stop you there. And
Yeah.
the reason why I want to stop you there is because I feel like what you're describing is kind of like a feeling when you're kind of at your wit's end with a company. You're like, hey, man, I've worked for you like for 5 years and I haven't seen like a single raise or a bonus or anything like that. And look how much money I've saved you. And I keep getting all these offers. If you don't start like taking care of me, man, I got other offers. I can go other places.
Yeah.
I don't think that necessarily is where like Jim from accounting, who's working there for like their first year, they go, well, it's been a year. Are you gonna give me this bonus? Otherwise, I'm gonna put my 2 weeks in. That's
Yeah.
definitely not the case.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of specify, what I'm more getting at is my personal philosophy, and this is something that I've done as a manager of teams, is if someone is, there, cogent, invested in the business, their performance is good, bare minimum, that deserves recognition. But on the same token, I think the person who is doing that, who is there, cogent, whatever, they also should have the awareness to know what kind of shape the business is in. Because I've actually been in startups that ultimately failed. And a lot of people, had to work more hours and, wear multiple hats. And they wanted a raise for it. But perhaps the thing that they didn't really consider is that, in this particular situation, you just need to look at it as though you're lucky to have a job. And if you really feel like this is an untenable situation, then start looking elsewhere. But your demands need to be reasonable,
I don't even want to call them demands because that's a little too aggressive of a word, in
What
my
would you
opinion.
say?
I would say just have an open discourse with your management when you've accomplished quite a bit, and just the way I explained it to a person that actually helped them get a promotion was just how often do you talk to your manager? Just every now and again, and don't say it openly, but like remind them of like, hey, yeah, remember that time I got like the company like this much money? Yeah,
Plant the seed.
plant the seed. Yeah, do something like that. And the other interesting thing that you brought up is if you want to go ahead and be able to be in a position where you have the leverage to go talk about these things, you need to put the work in. And we've talked about putting in the work in, but the funny thing about that is you'll find that if you go into a company and you want to put the work in so you have the leverage to go talk about maybe getting a raise, you're probably already going to get the raise before you even get the opportunity to talk to them. Like if you're doing a good job and if you're doing a really, really good job, you probably are going to be recognized even before you feel like you built up enough of a credit to speak about your merits. I mean, it happened to me a lot. Every time before I was like, I'm going to go, at the end of this year, I'm going to talk about the upwards growth of my job.
Yeah.
And the next month, I would win an award.
So what would I say? So basically, a reputation for hard work precedes itself. And if you work hard and even that you're doing good work that's helping the company move forward, that will get around.
Of course.
So basically that in conjunction with, talking to your manager regularly, keeping tabs, planting the seed, can help you help you at least know your worth and identify leverage that's applicable inside your current organization.
And it does not matter what kind of job you're doing. For the people out there who are doing the tiniest jobs, or your custodians, your kind of I don't want to say anything offensive. I just want to say, like, let's say you work in a mailroom. To give you an example, I worked at retail, and my job at retail initially starting off was I swept cigarette butts out of the parking lot every morning. I swept those parking lots so good, I won Employee of the Quarter for the entire base.
Nice. So
for a quarter.
and guys, I guess what like both of us are trying to communicate here is that, Ayn Rand has this quote about a bus driver, and essentially it goes on to say that the bus driver filled his role, did it well, and society kept moving on. So just because you're a bus driver doesn't mean you're any more or less important than a lawyer. So doing your job well, be it sweeping cigarette butts out of the parking lot, or you're some multi-million-dollar guru or you're Elon Musk, right? It doesn't matter. What really matters is, are you doing your work the best you can do it? I mean, does that seem legit? And that if you do your work as good as you possibly can, that's going to show not only in the quality of your work, but in your organization itself. And it will just intrinsically permeate through the organization. Dang, people, when they come into work, they're not bummed out to pull up and see a messy parking lot, and that just sets the tone for the day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
no, I understand 100% like what you're saying. I agree with you completely. But I couldn't have put it better than myself.
Okay, bet. Well, I have definitely taken more than an hour of your time. I appreciate it. For those of y'all listening today, my guest was the Level 1 King. His YouTube channel is Anime Occult. You can check that out if you're interested in some anime content. And I'm assuming you're a fan of podcasts because you're listening to this one. Check him out on the Vetted Games podcast, where can people go to subscribe to that?
You can go ahead and find the Vetted Games podcast. It is dubbed as the Vetted Podcast if you search on Spotify, iTunes, currently on the YouTube channel at Vetted Games, which I also do work for, and Stitcher. And there's like several other podcasting apps that are combined with iTunes. So if it's on iTunes, it's going to be on them. So wherever you go to listen to your podcast, chances are you'll be able to find it. Just check Vetted Podcast. You can also find me at Twitter at the Level 1 King, which will go ahead and redirect you to my Anime Occult Twitter. There I talk about everything from all the updates I'm doing, research streams that I do on Wednesdays for my content, for my YouTube channel, and all the updates for the podcast and other kind of analysis videos that I do.
Awesome. Well, King, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. That was a thoroughly enjoyable conversation, and I hope to have you back later.
Yeah, thanks, man. I really appreciate it. I'm glad that I got to be number one.
All right, man. Take it easy.
All right, take care.